Hi all, welcome to Spring Framework tutorial series. This is the 12th video of that series where we will be understanding about Spring Bean scope, different type of scope like singleton, prototype, a request, session, and how to use those type of scope widely in any Spring Boot application or any type of Spring application. Not only that, I will be showing you a live demonstrations about how the beans are being created as per different scope and how the flow of that beans, and also I will be covering some of the interview question regarding the bean scope, because this is the one of the important questions that in any Java based interview or the Spring Boot related interview you will get to have this type of question. And also I will be giving you some understanding about the Spring Bean lifecycle, and I'm sure that you already know about Spring Beans. If you don't have understanding about Spring Beans or the Spring Beans lifecycle, it is suggested to go through this my Spring Framework tutorial series where I have given a demonstration of Spring Bean lifecycle and about the IOC and how the beans is created and the beans annotation, component annotations. So it is highly recommended to watch this tutorial. If you have already knowledge about all the related things regarding the Spring, then that is great. And so let's get started about understanding about the Spring Bean scope. So we already have one project or Spring Boot project. I will just go through about the project structure. Still now I am not using scope. I will use it. Just I am explaining you about the project structure. So we are having one dependency added called the Spring Boot Starter Web, and we see that main applications. I have not used anything else at the rate Spring Boot application, and one employee.java class is there where I have used at the rate component annotations, and we know at this annotation is used to create beans, and I already have dedicated video on that. And there is a one what is said one constructor where I have printed a statement that employee.java employee bean is created, and post construct is there. So it will print hash code. I already have dedicated video regarding post construct. You will get to know on that Spring beans life cycle. Please watch that video after this. And also we are having one controller class annotated with REST controller, and I have auto add this employee, and this employee controller I am printing the employee controller bean is created. I'm just giving you overview. After that I will come to the scope one by one. Then post construct I have used. This is some statement is used, and there is a info info API I have created, and it is printing nothing, just the current hash code of uh, the employee controller and the hash code of the employee. And we see in the logout I have created one API called logout where I am just closing one of the session, and I'm printing some hash code for that employee class and the employee controller class. Now let's go ahead to understand basic theory first, then I will come back to the implementation of how to use other scope annotations. So as you already know that Spring Bean, so these are a kind of object, or it is a object, and well and managed by the Spring IoC container, and we have used IoC container like application context. And what is the Spring Beans lifecycle? So why I'm explaining is that this is the prerequisite to understand, and I already have a dedicated video. You can please go and watch that, but I'm just giving a theoretical understanding. So the Spring Bean lifecycle is a series of steps that a Spring Bean goes through from its creation to the destroy of the bean. Now let's understand what is the Spring Bean scope actually means. The bean scope referred to the life cycle of a bean. That means when the object of the bean will be instantiated, how long does the object is live, and how many object will be created. Because as per the different type of the scope, the object creation is varied. So basically it's control the instance creation of the beans, and it is managed by the Spring container. And we know everywhere our container only managing all type of beans. We as a developer, we are not managing those. So let's first understand the Singleton scope. Before that, I will come to this employee.java class and how to use that Singleton scope. So we have annotation called @scope. So it is coming from context.annotation. So and we can mention as singleton, Singleton. So if we did not mention, if did you observe that previously that address scope annotation was not there? So by default it will work as a singleton. So I will run the application and I will show you what output is coming. Before that, it is running. Before that, I will come to that part. So in the singleton scope, it is remember that only one instance will be created. Means only one object will be created throughout the application, or we can say throughout the container, and the same object will be shared as per the request made for that beans. Means anyone, if anyone is want to get that beans and want to do its operation, then also that particular bean, only one bean will be there or one object will be there. They will just fetch that object. So as I mentioned, this is the default scope. If we do not mention singleton, so by default it will assume as a singleton scope. So let me show you that what output is coming. So it is still running. So if we see that, so we are getting the statement called employee.java employee bean is created. If you go to this employee class, so employee class is having that other scope singleton annotation, and the employee controller is having nothing. So by default it will goes for singleton scope. So we see that employee object bean is created. Why it is created? So we see that employee object is having this statement from that employee.java employee bean is created. Then all the instant initialization method will be created as I am using post construct. After that, the employee.java employee object, you will see that object 835. Remember this, and in the employee.controller class, so here it is using this employee object. So and we see that employee.controller java class, so employee.controller bean is created, and it is a bean id for employee controller, and we see that employee bean is same which is being previously used. So we already have one info API. So let me hit that API and see whether the same ID we are getting or not. So I will go here, and so I have refreshed the page and we see. So in the /info, and the employee controller object is ended with 255, and we see that 255 employee object, and employee object is 835. So with this, throughout the application we are having only one bean is created, or only one one object is created. So here two classes there, so that's why the two object is created for employee controller and for for singleton employee class. Now let's understand the second scope, which is called the prototype. So in the prototype, the Spring IoC controller will create a new instance for that bean every time a request is made for that specific beans. So previously we have employee class, right? So and we have only one bean is created. If someone wants to access that bean, then that time a new request or the new beans will be created, or new object will be created. For every new request, a new object is created. So if we see that, I will use as in here prototype, prototype prototype. Let me run the application. So we see that we have used scope as prototype for employee and the employee controller. So as of now there is no request made. So because we are not using or any employee controller object or employee object, so no object is being created. So why no? So you see that every time when a new request is made, that time only object will be created. So I will go to this info and I will refresh the page whether we see that request or not, or we are able to Yeah, we are getting this object. See, employee controller bean is created, employee bean is created. So as the request is being fulfilled successfully, next I will made again request for the same API. So I am doing again info API. So will see that this time the new object is created. The previous employee object is 777. Now employee object is 139. And employee controller object is 742 previously. Now it is 154. So with this prototype, every time any request is made, the new object will be created. Now let's come to the third scope, which is called request scope. So in this is comes under the HTTP request. So a new beans will be created for each HTTP request, and the lifecycle of the request scope bean is bound to that HTTP request. I will explain you. Don't worry. I'm just giving you an theoretical understanding first. That means for each HTTP request, a new beans instance is created and it exists until the completion of that request. So let me show you that example and I will explain you. And also, if we will be using scope value equal to request. So I will be going somewhere employee and why we are giving a scope proxy mode equal to target class, because if that object is not present, so that time it will be created a proxy of this employee and whoever want to the definition will be done. And I will just comment it out. So it is by default what is that prototype is singleton. So I run the application. So we see that as it is employees scope is request, and we see that it is accessing employee controller is trying to access that employee, and nowhere and that employee object is created. Did you observe that nowhere employee object is created, because as of now we did not requested that employee object. So there is no employee object is created. So I will just refresh this page. I will access the info API. Now we are requesting that employee object, right? So now we see that employee object, we are able to access that employee object. Now let's understand the session scope. What is that means? The life cycle of a session scope bean is bound to an HTTP session. So until the session is closed, what is session means? Then for example, you have logged in to your application. Until you logged out, your session is not closed. So that was a part of session. So we'll do an API called to close the session. So this type of session scope is useful when you are working for any authentication or some kind of app that user want to log in and log out. So I will create a session. So there is I have created an logout API where we are calling get session invalidate. So doing this, the session will be closed. So now what I will do, I will make that scope as session, and this scope I will just comment out, or I will keep that request only, or I will comment out and I will run the application. Then I will show you that every time we are after closing the session, every time we are requesting, then a new beans will be created for employee controller. So we see that initially that employee object is created because this scope is a singleton and this scope is session. So I will hit the info API. I'm hitting the info API, and we see in IntelliJ, and we see in IntelliJ like employee controller bean is created, object is created. So now I will refresh the info again. We will see the same, what is that, same object is being accessed. So 9167. Now I will close the session. Then we will see the new object is created. So what are the API to close the session? Just log out. So I'll go here, log out, enter. Now the session is closed. Now we will hit again this info API. Now we see the new bean is created. So employee controller bean is 923, and if we see that previous employee controller bean is 132. So like that the session scope works. So we have got understanding about Spring Bean scope like request, session, prototype, singleton, and suggested to watch you about Spring Bean lifecycle videos. And thank you all for watching the video. Please subscribe to the channel.